And welcome to episode 54 of Own the Build with me, Paul Hemming, and I've got a great guest today. So today's episode is called Keeping Your Pipeline Full, and we're joined by a man who quite literally knows how to do it by all accounts. I'm delighted to introduce to you Jack Jiggens. He is both a developer and an investor at XP Property. Welcome to the show, Jack.
Thank you very much, Paul. Good to be on here. I've listened to quite a few episodes, and I feel very fortunate that I can come on and share a bit about where I'm probably better. But there's a lot of other areas that I've been picking up and learning from this podcast and others.
Oh, you're too kind. That's very kind of you, Jack. Now, the big question on my lips, having started this conversation with you, is I see you're a man who likes to drink orange squash because you're on dry January or whatever your excuse is. I like squash as well. What's the best squash flavour out there?
Oh, good question. Unfortunately, I know a really sad answer to this. Waitrose do a grape and elderflower. It's called a grape and elderflower high juice, and it is something special. If you get one of those, you're going to go through it pretty quickly. Yeah, that's my favourite.
Well, I tell you what, that makes my orange and pineapple Robinsons sound like a complete joke. So I think I'm almost tempted to say we should wrap up this episode now. Everyone pop off to Waitrose, go get yourself some grape and elderflower because it does sound good. Apart from being the savviest man in town on the squash front, tell us about yourself, Jack. Introduce yourself, your business, and what you do.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. So yeah, I suppose it was inevitable that I would be in property at some stage. My grandfather ran his own construction company, and my dad was a builder and what I call accidental developer, which is someone that decides to build houses and realizes that there's a bit of profit at the back end. So every house that I lived in as a child, my dad built. My mum always brings up a funny story when I was about 3 or 4 years old, and she couldn't find me. And I was 3 stories up on a scaffolding with like a gone out cigarette butt in my mouth, pretending I was a bricklayer, which is not what you want your 4-year-old. Yeah, which is not what you want your 4-year-old son doing. So that was at a very early age. Always grew up. We actually quite often lived in porta cabins inside the garden of the houses that my dad was building. But out the back of that and out the back of school, I went to university and studied business and marketing. Once I had finished my degree, I worked within a recruitment company, so basically in 360 sales, so sourcing jobs and placing leads, which built up my sales acumen pretty quickly. It was pretty intense training. I wouldn't necessarily say it was my calling, hence why I'm not there now. But out the back of that position, I had multiple businesses and side ventures that I was basically doing. So I'd set up a gym, because I spotted an opportunity in my local town. I had a meal prep company prepping meals. I also had a small buying and selling business. So I was trading basically anything on eBay. So whether that was buying in from China and selling in individual unit items, or alternatively buying low and selling high on things that I know are worth more than what they're selling for. And also I had a very low key sort of gardening business where I'd spot where someone would post on Facebook, I need a gardener. I would give them a price, and then I'd bring in the labor cheaper and I'd mark it up. So all of this was sort of like my entrepreneurial flair, keeping it busy, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I eventually just thought to myself, I know property, I know it fairly well. And I think one of the biggest reasons it took me a while to go from someone with a degree that works in an office to go back onto site was I didn't feel that, if I'm honest, I didn't feel like I was at that level. I would have been the most qualified labourer in Oxfordshire. And it took me a while to make that transition. But once I did, I never looked back. So I then went into building houses, basically.
And some developers might roll their eyes when I say this, but I get the impression that some developers don't like the idea of having muddy boots on site. Given what you've just described, sounds like you're quite the opposite. Sounds like something that you were accustomed to from from minute one? Is that something you enjoyed? Do you like seeing the project come together on site?
Yeah. So today I don't really do much on the tools work. I'm on site quite a lot.
Here we go.
So today we've got to the stage where we get a principal JCT contractor on board, and it would actually hinder the project with me getting on there and trying to swing about a hammer, pretending I still know what I'm doing. Whereas back when I left, the office, I was on site, and we built me and my partner at the time built several houses just from the ground up, did everything. So I was very much getting my boots dirty without a choice. If I can get my boots dirty out of choice, I love it now. It's a lovely privilege to have, whether it's go and help people on certain stages of the build, see it from the ground up. You spot things that you don't spot from a desktop, which I think is key, and it is. And I can see a lag where that's actually going to slip over the next few years, where people just got so accustomed to not being present. And I think there will be, small gaps of cost savings and value enhancing that people aren't making. But I'm used to getting my boots dirty, and I think that'll be indefinitely.
Excellent. And so you've had, for such a young man, you've had quite the career to date. And I see that your current business, XP Property, was nominated for 2 awards. Just before we jump in, tell me a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, of course. So I'd start off with the businesses. So when I started building houses from the ground up, we did, I think we did about a dozen projects end to end, and sold those on. And it got to the stage where I was so fed up with actually being on the tools and working through winter and so on and so forth. Bit of a diva, really, you could say. So I wanted to work smarter and not harder, which is where the sort of brainchild of XP Property came. So in 2018, I set up XP Property with Ben, who you've also interviewed on the podcast before. And in the same year, I set up a company called Central Suites, which is shared with my brother. And that's more of a lettings and rental business. But XP Property itself is, we like to call ourselves an SME property development business in the south of the UK. We're extremely dynamic. We're extremely confident to challenge areas of the market. And we've loved growing that business from what it was in 2018, buying our first project in March, to now delivering between 15 and 20 million pounds worth of schemes. The business delivers anything from residential, commercial, mixed use, land, planning, and it's all within the sort of south of the UK, which is keeping us busy. But more about the more about the awards. So we were very fortunate to be nominated by someone you've actually interviewed, for these 2 awards. I know, small world.
Who is it?
Helen Shorley kindly nominated us for the 2 roles. Yeah. So everyone loves Helen. She great reputation in the property world, especially the personal side of things. She actually said that she thought we would be a good contestant in one of the categories. We decided to go for development of the year and HMO under 6 beds of the year. We came second and the runner-up in the development scheme, but hands up, we got beaten by a very, very good development. And that was a 14 mixed-use scheme in Reading, which was 7 flats, 7 offices. It's got a bit of everything in it. If we have time to delve into that, I could tell you about how we did asset management, planning, commercial conversion, commercial building, resi building, all of the above. And the HMO award, we're really pleased to say that we won that. So we won under 6 bed HMO of the year, which is a property we own in Oxfordshire. And it's comically, since we won the award, we've actually also just got planning on it to extend it as well. So maybe we should resubmit it this year.
There you go. So it's destined. It's destined for success. It's destined for success. So my final question. I keep on saying it's my final question before we talk about the topic that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
You're a property developer. What is a common myth or misconception about your job, do you think?
Really good question, actually. I'd say there's 2. I think the most common misconception is that developers are greedy. And I hear it all the time. Estate agents say it to my face, banks say it to my face, surveyors say it to my face, and I'm like,
yeah.
And my sort of response really is, you know, a property developer is fundamentally someone that orchestrates, you know, the orchestra, and everyone has their opinion, and normally when you hear that, it's because the people in the orchestra want to be orchestrating, but they don't want to put in the hard work, they don't want to take the risk, and they don't know
Take the risk. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's my first common misconception. I don't know a single property developer.
Not greedy. Right.
Exactly. I don't know a single property developer that I don't think's doing well in the last sort of 5 to 10 years that isn't a hard worker and smart.
Yeah.
So I think that's an unfair assumption. The second one is I don't want to sound all salesy here, but you need loads of money to do developments. Yeah. Yeah. So the second myth I think is that you need loads of money to do developments. I don't think you necessarily do. You need the expertise, and you need to know how to deliver them. You need to know how to structure them, and you need to know how to find them. And if you can do that and be transparent and trustworthy, I think that there's funds out there to help you get into developments if you wanted to.
Now, Jack, you're doing my job for me. That is the most beautiful, eloquent segue onto the topic of conversation, right? It's how you just need to know how to find projects and how to deliver them. So we're going to talk about managing your pipeline, growing a pipeline of projects, developments that you can work on. Why is that so important to you? You talk about it a lot.
I do. So when Ben and I came together, we very quickly realized that we definitely had a different skill set in the business. I'm very process driven, extremely organized, with quite a strong sales acumen going into the business. And I like the sort of chase, if that makes sense. And Ben is very much heavy on the design and delivery of projects. You know, if Ben won the lottery tomorrow, he'd still be building 2-bed semi-detached houses because he loves it. And that's Ben all over. He just loves property and creating property. So what we decided to do was split the business and have an ethos of divide and conquer. And we see developer partnerships all the time where they both follow each other around and do the same thing, but they just do it together. Yeah. We're not of that ilk. We sometimes don't speak for a week, and we'll be like, "Oh, by the way, I need you to do this. This project's where this," and we check in on those bases. So my part of the business is acquisitions, and that's why it's so important for me. But it's obviously really important for any development business. So I suppose I get asked 2 questions more than any other question. One of them is, how do you find deals? And the other is, how do you fund deals? Now, we could probably do a 4-hour podcast on each of those individually, but we're today focusing on finding deals. But the most important thing to remember, if they're the most 2 commonly asked questions that I get asked, second to that, I always go back and say, if you find a good deal, it will fund itself. People look at it and be like, well, the deal works. I just got to get the right jockey. So it's like all about the horse and the jockey component. Yeah. So the developer is the jockey, not in any other sense other than riding a horse. and the deal is obviously the horse. So in principle, I believe if you find the right deal with the right delivery team, it will fund itself. You'll be able to find funding partners. So now like delving into sense. Why. Yeah. Brilliant. I mean, you would.
So what is your process exactly?
Exactly. So it's obviously extremely important for us to find projects because we are property developers. If we don't find them, we're not developing anything, and the business shuts down, and we all move on and become, you know, whatever our other Ben would be on Homes Under the Hammer. I'd probably be a stunt man. But that's a bit of But you need developments to be running a development business, right? And they need to be profitable. And one of the hardest things one of the hardest things about finding a development is there's so much noise and putting a spotlight on ones that actually work. And then the second part is de-risking it and making it work. So we have a very organized process, and I'm such a creature of habit. It's ridiculous. I love monitoring irons in the fires and all sorts, and we have a really robust, in our opinion, process. And I hope for listeners out there, so we've been running our businesses for 4 years now, and across the businesses we've averaged a purchase every 6 weeks, and that's sites and properties. Wow. Which is I actually don't know anyone of our size that's matching or exceeding that. So we've always.
How are you doing it, Jack? You've got to tell us.
That's what it's coming. It's coming.
In all seriousness.
It's coming. Yeah. So,
I'm excited. I'm on the edge of my seat here.
Good. So, I mean, I'm like Mr. Process in a process in a process. I'm a bit like those Chinese dolls that you open up, where like I will tell you a bit, and then there's a lot more to it. So we can sort of delve into any of these in any more detail. But the most 4 important things to finding successful property schemes is knowing what you want. So I'll give you an example. What we want is schemes in the south of the UK, probably within an hour or 2 of where I live, that are between 1 and 20 units. That's it. And that could be a plot of land that has scope between 1 and 20 units. That could be a mixed use building. That could be an air rights. It could be anything. Have a process is the second one. And it's down to you as a developer to build your own process, because my process won't work for you, and vice versa, because I'm looking for different things.
Sounds like your process might work for me, to be honest with you, Jack, if you're getting one every 6 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, happy to share. The third,
go on.
The third, and it's a bit of a cringy one, but it's trust the process. I see all the time where someone goes out and views sites for 6 months, and then they say to me in month 9 they haven't got any deals, and I said, well, what have you done over the last 3 months? And they say, well, I gave up because it didn't work. And I'm like, well, you probably just got to the point where you've broken inertia. You're starting to get a name for yourself. Agents are starting to send you stuff, and you're probably a week away from actually like realizing the juice from that squeeze. So trust the process is point number 3. And then point number 4, which you're going to love, is just put in the work. It's not easy. You've got to work hard. You've got to be on your numbers. You've got to be on your process. You've got to be on your organization. You've got to know what's what, what's where, who you should be speaking to. And that's all fed into your process. So that's like our real like motive process, but I can go into more details of actually how we find them. So we break that process down by categories of on market, again, another four step, on market, off market, which could also be known as direct to vendor, if you're contacting someone directly about their land or their planning or whatever it may be. Your own network, so people that are on these calls that I know and people that you communicate with, we often have people approach us and go, like, I've got this deal, I don't really know how to do this, and this. And that's where you can quite easily hijack that acquisition process and jump on board a scheme that's already been secured. And the fourth and most important one, and the one that we have the most success with, is revisiting your previous pipeline. So all the deals that you've looked at before and offered on and weren't successful, follow those up. 34% of deals that go under offer to exchange fall through. So if you keep tabs on those deals, you're very, very likely to secure. And we're exchanging on one in 2 weeks. Yeah. It's a good metric.
Really interesting that is, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, it is, isn't it? To know that 1 in 3 offers that have gone, you can potentially warm back up. That is very interesting.
Exactly. The best thing about those deals as well is the agent can't be bothered to do another load of round of viewings. The seller's more distressed because they've probably wasted between 2 and 6 months in the legals process getting the run around, and maybe they've pulled out because of funding or an obscure element. Exactly. So it's only going to be better. So we love following up on those. I would have said 40 to 50% of our deals is secured by follow-up.
Really? That's really interesting. And this whole conversation is very interesting, Jack. And after the break, I want to talk to you a little bit more about qualifying and how you pre-qualify, kind of that first point that you made. But we'll do that just after this break. Go grab some squash. Awesome, mate. How's it going? You're very good, mate.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it. I'm just chatting away.
Yeah, no, you're good, mate. You're good. Umar, how are you feeling about life?
Umar's the one with the bad signal.
Yeah, no, he gives us a load of shit, and then look at the state of his signal. He's outrageous, really, Jack, to be honest with you. It's the attitude that I find difficult to stop.
Good.
Do you want to grab a drink, Jack, or anything like that, or are you all good?
I'm all right. I'm good.
Jack is looking like a man who wishes he had grape and elderflower squash, but he's all out. He's looking like he's missing it. So, Jack, I run my own business. I work on a sales team within that business as well. And to us, qualification of prospects is a big part of what we do, in that we are looking for a certain characteristic of business in a certain region, and they need to be doing certain functions. And you kind of alluded to that a little bit yourself about your first step, what do you want? So what is the procedure? What things? Let me frame this a different way. You said that you wanted to have projects in the south of the UK, 1 to 20 units only. What was it that what were the steps that you came to arrive at that decision?
So I think my signal's back on. Good. So the 1 to 20 units is specifically the size that we want to be dealing. So we want to fall in the catchment of accidental developer or architects that get really confident, or people that want to run their own schemes like Grand Design, and the big home builders like Redrow, Bewley, Berkeley Group, Taylor Wimpey, all of the big home builders. We want to fall within that catchment in between, so that we're securing those medium ground sites. Let me quickly just put my Wi-Fi on because my signal is playing up.
I'm still hearing you all okay, mate, so don't worry on that front.
We should be good now. So that's how we want the size, because that's within that catchment that we're aiming for. And then location is just purely because we live in the south. We want to be able to sort of feel these assets. The best thing about investing in real estate and doing developments is you can see it. It's not like cryptocurrencies or the FTSE 100. You can see it. It's a plot of land. You can put charges on it. It's tangible. So we want stuff down south. Now we love staying down south, because when I went through several events and courses, and I don't want to name the few where it's
proper southerners out, yeah.
Well,
anywhere north of the Watford Gap is getting a bit scary, isn't it?
If I'm really honest, north is like past Oxford for me. So
that's true. Okay, you're like I'm from Warwickshire originally, so Oxfordshire is kind of like the middle ground on the way down to the big smoke for me. But I guess you're more Midlandsy, but you're on the south side of the Midlands, I'd say.
Exactly. But when I was sort of setting out, I heard time and time again, like, you got to go up north to get double-digit yields. You got to go up north because it's affordable. If we're building sites and adding bricks to land, the more value per square foot, the better for us. So staying in affluent, high-value areas is why we stay down south. So that's how we qualified that. That's what we need and what we look for.
And it seems like you have a finite understanding of exactly what you want, which must help you find what you want much more easily, because you know exactly what you're looking for, and you then have a great process to get you there. So then the next step, and you mentioned you were in recruitment and kind of in sales roles, and you were interested in sales roles. Is there something that you are understanding once you get to that stage where you've identified the site, where you're exploring like the seller's wants, the seller's needs, and like their psychology, that is then helping you to attack opportunities in a different way?
Yeah, 100%. So I think there's 2 points to pick up on there, and I love that you've brought that up. You're talking my language. But so on the topic of you saying you know what you want, I try and keep it really, really short and sweet and punchy, because if you can't deliver that sentence effectively to estate agents, fellow business people, your employees, whoever it is, how are they then going to replicate that into a market or to a vendor, or look for it and think of you when they're looking for those things? So that's why the requirement has got to be really short, sharp, and punchy and memorable. And then moving more on to your point of motivation.
For example?
So yeah, south of England, 1 to 20 units. How can an agent forget that?
Okay.
If it's outside that, I don't want it.
Okay, fine. That is simple.
Fine.
Okay.
Now, when it comes down to motivations, which is something that I love analysing because it gets deals done. And realistically, little secret here for everyone. Someone selling an asset or a plot of land or a property will only be motivated by one of two things: time or money. And that's it. And it's literally a direct correlation sliding scale that you can then adapt your offer to suit their needs. So what we do to account for that and understand their motives, if we can't do it by questioning and open questioning with some direct questioning in there, and sometimes we get shown sites that we're not directly in contact with the owner, or the agent hasn't done a very good job of pre-qualifying them, is we do something called a dual offer, which is offering one which is unconditional. So this is the price we'll pay you to do the deal and get it tied up. And that's the one when they're time motivated, so they want it done soon. And then the second offer will be something more creative, like we'll take a while, but we might get planning, or we might kick this tenant out and refill it with this tenant, or we'll exchange now and complete in 3 years. And in that time, we want to do a bit of asset management. That offer is someone that's more money motivated and less time motivated, more patient. And that normally starts the conversation where they come back and go, we prefer offer B, but we don't like this, this, and this. And then we start negotiating. And
are you always offering? I'm not sure. Maybe I've misunderstood. Is there always an A and a B when you're going, or are you understanding their position and then going either A or B?
Yeah. So if we don't know their motivation, we always offer both. It's one of those comical ones where your unconditional offer makes your conditional offer look better anyway, because otherwise the unconditional could look offensive if you come in half of what the guide price is. So if we don't know their motives, we always offer both, and then they tend to sort of delve into a bit more detail of what they prefer. If we know their motives, we sometimes don't mess around with the complication of them having to read the conditions of the of the others. But
and that makes perfect sense. And is there a step in between? So if you don't know their motive, you may offer A and B, right? But is it better to know their motive? Are you trying to get that middle ground where you can engineer in some way, extracting the information so that you can then really understand what's motivating them? And how do you do that?
Yeah, so we 100%. If you can find out, the more information, knowledge is power. The more information you have, the easier it's going to be for you to adapt and ensure that your offer is best received. And we normally do that by asking the reasons for selling, why they wouldn't wait such and such time for the planning to play out. And sometimes it's like they need to pay off a loan of 55 grand, and then you can go, well, we'll pay off that loan. Yeah. We'll make the deposit accessible by the seller, and we'll then do the deal later on. You can sometimes save costs in-house by doing that. But the motives are key. So we try and find out through the agent, or we try and get a conversation with them directly if we can. And most of it is just by, just from speaking to them, build a bit of rapport, standard stuff that you're probably doing in your business, and just really understand their reasons behind it, and why they need to sell or want to sell. And sometimes they just turn around and be like, well, I thought it was valuable and I just want the best price. In which case you go, well, if you're patient and wait 2 years for planning permission, the site's going to be worth more and I can pay you more. But for us, that de-risks it, because we don't get the planning. We can walk away from it.
Yeah. I can see, Jack, I can really start to see now why you have such an impressive pipeline of deals that I'm sure you're growing, but also what you've achieved in the first 4 years of your business, the average of 6 per week. It's really, really impressive. And I guess you kind of sit in a really unique kind of like set of experience in that you have this really robust construction background that you grew up with as a kid. You then went into sales, and now you're in property. Is there, and I'm wondering whether there's a huge amount of property developers with such a sales focused mind. Do you read books around sales? Is it something that you're really focused on? Do you think that's giving you a big cutting edge?
I actually think the biggest cutting edge I've had is probably from the sort of intensive training that I had in the sales company. And it's a bit of a boring answer because no one that's listening can go and jump into that company and be like, right, Jack said that I could come in here and get some really good training for 2 weeks and then piss off and be a really good developer. But I do like reading. I do enjoy. I think entrepreneurial or self-development books is such a great way of someone basically utilizing 15 or 20 years worth of someone's experience and jam packing that into a book. But I haven't actually really got any books that I would recommend for sales, but I do have 2 recommendations of books that I think are really effective for, it could be any business owners or developers or anyone in construction or even sourcing sites. The first one is Your Life, Your Legacy, which is a profile driven book written by Roger Hamilton, and it basically analyzes who's who. So everyone has a personality type and everyone's naturally gifted at certain things, and the best team is a team playing off their strengths. It's like when you set up a football team and the big lumpy guy that's tall and good at heading sits at the back at centre back and the fast people sit on the wings. Now if your team can't analyze that, and it's very difficult for people in business to analyze what they're good or bad at without it being, a scorecard on speed, agility, control, passing. It's very difficult to analyze. Are you good at acquisitions? Are you good at running numbers? Are you good at forward planning? Are you a creative? So the first book is Your Life, Your Legacy. It tells you your profile and helps you understand others. I'd get most of our staff to read that book because it helps them understand why a colleague can't do the things as quickly as they can and why they're slower at certain things than colleagues. So that's the first one, and that has
interesting,
and that has does bring out your sort of sales and help you analyze it, what you're naturally good at. And then I suppose the other book that I got recommended is Traction, which is, I think, a phenomenal book to really understand. I've
read that actually.
It's a great book. Understand the sort of cogs that you can improve in your day-to-day, month-to-month, annually, desk and business life.
You're an interesting man, Jack. You certainly are. I have one final question for you. So, talking on the topic of one of your latest projects and putting that project into your mind, if you could turn back time and talk to yourself at the start of that project and tell you to do something different, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, wow. That is such a good question. It would probably be one of the projects that I delivered on the tools. And it would probably be stop using your hands and start using your head sooner. Because I had quite a long period of time where I wasn't enjoying delivering houses with my hands, but I knew I was learning. And I was sort of anticipating in 10 years' time, I might run a development business, but I could have done it, started on it the tomorrow and worked on that in the tomorrow. So it's got nothing to do with the particular project that went wrong, right, or indifferent, because projects come and go. And you every project that you do, you learn from, and has a different purpose in your growth for that reason. You actually learn more from projects that go wrongly than rightly. So I think that the activity is the important thing.
That's why I like to ask that question.
Yeah. But the one thing I would say to me is buck up your ideas, start studying, start attending more events, start meeting with more people that are doing where you want to be, and get off the tools sooner would be my advice to myself.
Wonderful. Well, Jack, you have been fascinating to chat to. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm going to share your details, XP Properties details, in the podcast description, and get in touch with Jack. You guys know that he knows what he's talking about after that. It's really, really interesting, Jack. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Paul. Absolute pleasure. And give me your address because I want to send some high juice from Waitrose your way.
Oh, now we're talking. On that note, guys, I will see you all next week. Nice one.
Cheers, Paul.